everybody's got to put their personal club ambition to one side for that goal. There can be no argument, and Ralph Rimmer should be coming out and saying that to clubs that, look, I don't care if you want a fixture against your near neighbours over Christmas. If it doesn't help us win the World Cup, and we've got to give ourselves the best possible chance. And we need players that are fit, that aren't burnt out by the time they get to the World Cup. And we need everything in place that we can possibly do to give ourselves the best chance and the best preparation as well. So we need if we could have an extra week's gap, for example, on the NRL next year, that could give us an advantage. Why not manipulate our competition to do it? It's within our gift. Why not do that?
Yeah, as well, talking about, that if you look at restarting in the middle of August, going through till January, having 1 week then before you start your next season, and then going through straight to the World Cup, you're looking at 15 months, almost solid playing for some people, aren't you?
Yeah.
And there's very few players who won't have picked up some form of at least 30% reduction injury at that point.
And you'd think that you're more likely to... I don't know if there's any science behind this or not, but playing in the winter, you'd think that these players aren't used to this. So if they're playing in December and January, they're not used to the same sort of contact in those conditions. It's going to impact, surely, their injury record in those conditions.
Yeah. But also, when you think about it, when we start in February or whatever, they're only playing at a lower level because it's the start of the season and everything else. And they say, well, at least the harder ground's going to come and all the rest of it. But to go from playing on that harder ground to suddenly at the back end of the season when your muscles are more fatigued and everything else, and then playing in the stodgy, horrible mud, it's going to cause more injury problems, I would have thought.
It just, because they won't be conditioned for those conditions.
I suppose also pitches is an important thing, that by the time we end up at the World Cup, some of the pitches could be quagmires because they haven't had a chance to properly reseed them for 2.5 seasons, potentially.
And also, which one of the chairmans was saying about that we shouldn't be getting all bogged down and thinking about fixtures at the moment? We should be thinking more about bigger issues about how we get the game started. Well, no, we have to think about where and when we can play our games because there's other sports played in half of the stadiums that we play in.
Yeah.
So you have to think about those things. You can't just dismiss planning fixtures at this stage. You have to think about it all. You can't leave anything till later, and people who think you can aren't actually thinking the right way. You should be trying to work it all out, not just work out the bit that you like to know about.
Yeah, it's for us, whichever team, it's already in the flow of their season, they're meant to get the advantage when it comes to booking matches. So from August till October, it's us because we're already in the flow of our season, but it's going to cause massive problems this year because obviously, it could potentially go on for another 5 months.
Well, when you're throwing that... Are they in the championship? So they play all these extra games anyway, these midweek games. Where are you going to fit your midweek games in? And then you start having to play all your midweek games on the road. And then that skews things again. That makes things a bit weird. People will cry foul about that. It's very hard to sort out. But surely scheduling fixtures in is something you have to be thinking about when you're modelling these.
It's a massive issue, especially given that there are a number of dual... stadia. Dual use stadia.
So we're all pretty strongly in favour of ending the season in November, having already accepted that there's no Ashes.
Yes.
How do we all feel about some sort of rep football at the end of that campaign then, in terms of the Exiles getting mentioned? So if we did, I think we'll run a poll, an SLP poll for the listeners to find out. So to find out what they think for us to talk about next week, maybe. But would you support England playing against Exiles, or something maybe like what Alan suggested, maybe a Lancashire-Yorkshire type situation, or some sort of regional competitions, that sort of stuff? Or would you just accept that there isn't going to be any games for England in 2021? So we'll start with Alan on that one. It's a three choice, I suppose. No games, Rose's games, or Exiles games.
Of those three choices, I'd go Exiles games, but with a suggestion that you could also look at, there's nothing to suggest you stop you running a England Knights against a Jamaica team, fixture again. So you could. There's nothing to stop you doing that as well.
Yeah, Sarah.
I'd go nothing.
Yeah, fair. Tim.
I'd be inclined to have some sort of, depends what Sean wants. If you want some sort of group get together, I'd have some sort of possibles versus probables type game to try and find out who are effectively, he should by this point probably know most of what his squad will be, of who he'll want. It's finding those extra players is probably the question. So it's how he finds those, or is it something like an England Knights as part of, say, a Home Nations Cup? So you have England, Scotland, Ireland and Wales play some sort of tournament, and that forms, Sean Wayne is involved in that, and you do it that way.
Do you know what? I think we're going to put a fourth option on this poll then, because that point you've just made about England probables against possibles sort of thing reminds me of something from the Sky Cricket Watch Along for the 2010 2020 World Cup final that they had on a couple of weeks ago, because the players were talking about a couple of the players that made their way into that side that were crucial in that campaign, like Craig Keyswetter opening the batting. He only got in the squad because they played basically that game. They played it.
Yeah, something cricket have done for years, that sort of approach. Yeah.
And all the bowlers were like, we can't. This guy, he hits the ball so hard, we can't not have him in our lineup. And so he, with very few games in the first team, ended up being a mainstay and was man of the match in the World Cup final. So, yeah, we'll throw that option in too. I'd say a one-off Exiles game would be good, as long as we could be sure that the Exiles will actually care. If you know what I mean. Because they've got nothing to play for. That's the difficulty for me. But if they do play like they've got something to play for, then by all means that's the best of the options, because you're talking about probably the highest caliber of individual players that you're coming up against. But if otherwise, I'd want to create something where you definitely can have that environment. But a Lancashire versus Yorkshire would give you that. But would it give you? Would you learn much more about the players at a higher level? That's hard to tell, but that's an option too. Yeah, we'll put that out for the listeners, and everyone can get in touch with their views, and we'll talk about it more next week. 22nd of May, the RFL confirmed Leeds Rhinos will not face disciplinary action from the Rugby Football League after they refused to travel for their game at Catalans Dragons in March. The Rhinos postponed the game, scheduled to take place behind closed doors, because forward Joe Greenwood had shown symptoms of coronavirus. I'm pretty sure if they'd have got on that plane was the day that Spain were turning planes back, and their plane was destined for Barcelona. So common sense has come out all there, and people choosing not to travel definitely are the winners right now, I would say, if anything. So everyone's come out of that one sorted out. And Love Rugby League reported that Barla have offered support to community clubs during the coronavirus pandemic by inviting them to apply for a share of initial £50,000 fund. Grants of between £100 and £1,000 are available, with the fund to be administered jointly by Barla and the RFL. The potential of a further £25,000 could be released depending on the numbers of applicants. Tim, you're our community game representative, as well as lots of other hats that you wear in Rugby League. Positive move, going to be helpful to all the clubs, do you think?
I think it is. I think, there's the good thing is there have been plenty of funding sources available for the clubs that need it. At the Pitsanger Panthers, we're fortunate that, having only played one game in our entire club history, that we don't actually have the outlay or anything that other clubs would have. But I think it's definitely something that's a good option to have out there. I mean, there's a number of conditions attached and a lot of paperwork you have to fill in to get that. So there is governance around it, which is good. It's not just we'd like 50 quid. Oh, here you go. It's going to well-run clubs. You have to have lots of standards and things in place. It's possibly not designed for new clubs anyway, so it's well thought through from what I've seen.
That's a positive, isn't it? Then it's good to be doing something. And then today, 4020 News reported the boss of NRL officials, Graham Annesley, has explained that an open and honest conference call between ARL chairman Peter V'landys and the NRL referees has led to unions officials dropping their action with the Fair Work Commission over the decision of the competition to return to one referee. So the final major hurdle, I think, to overcome after all the other hurdles that they've had to overcome has been cleared for the NRL to resume this coming Thursday. That's it, the news. That was good news, weren't it? Big news.
Very meaty news this week.
Right, we're going to do some match reviews then. Match reviews then, and we got in a few this week, mostly from our friend Fatboy Rob, which is great to hear from him so much this week. We'll sort of take them in turns and talk about some of these matches and maybe any other matches then that we've watched in the last week before we can actually start talking about real matches again next week. So Fatboy Rob first got in touch about Cass versus the Bottlers, which I interpreted to be Castleford versus St Helens on Friday night on that Sky showed the semi-final, the Luke Gale semi-final from 2017, because otherwise it would have been Castleford against themselves in the grand final that year. So Fatboy Rob said, never in doubt, I've always rated Thaler. It's good to get the nervy one out of the way before we play the easy beats in a couple of weeks. With Zach and Gale, nothing can go wrong. We could dominate for half a decade with this squad as long as no one self-destructs or takes 30 pieces of silver. #Coif.
Did you see Zach tweeting an apology?
No.
About what he did.
Which particular thing that he did?
The Castleford thing.
Was it during the game? During the game being on?
I think it was just after. Yeah. I didn't pay loads of attention because then, people are like, oh, mate, you don't need to apologise. And I was like, well, to be fair, he was a bit of an idiot.
Yeah, owning up for your actions and stuff is, I think, a good quality for someone to have and a step towards becoming a better person. So I think that's a good thing that he's done. Yeah.
And he didn't even have to have a press conference in the Rose Garden to do it.
Well, no, because he apologised. But
oh yeah, true.
I didn't see that. That's cool. Do you remember that? I watched little bits of it, but I didn't watch the whole thing.
Yeah, no, it is an apology. It's sort of an apology. Things happen in life, but memories last forever. 2017, for what it's worth for me, will always be special. To the few that still hang on to it, I apologise. But it is what it is, and we love on.
Yeah?
It's more of an apology than...
Well, yeah.
Other things.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I think that's fair dues. That game, though, was a very exciting game, but I forgot that Luke Gale's try that he scored was quite a long-range try, weren't it? He had to support a break to go and score and stretches stitches out and stuff. I thought
that's all I remember is him lifting his shirt up and that was just unnecessary.
I didn't remember the try itself, but I remembered the stomach rubbing action. But yeah, that was as good as it got, I suppose, for Cass, unfortunately, that exciting semi-final win with the Luke Gale drop goal. Who wants to do the next one? Tim, you can do the next one.
Yep, so it's Magic Retro, and it was Wigan versus Leeds. Again, Fatboy Rob. And he said, it's a shame both teams couldn't lose in this battle of AIDS versus cancer, but Leeds deserve to lose for their pathetic support. Ryan Hall's head is fucking massive. #Melonhead. It is big.
And actually, I thought heads didn't get bigger as you got older. but they do, because mine has got fatter. But also, Ryan Hall's definitely has, because